Well, welcome back to Allison Customs Project Car TV. We're back on the Scout, the episode 29, I think. I'm back on the quarter panel on the driver's side again, and it's time. We've got it all welded up, started knocking the welds down, and I've got some low spots. You know, just as you weld that metal, it pulls back, wants to pull away from the heat source, and sometimes you can kind of cheat it by leaving things a little bit long and having almost too much, well, actually having too much metal there, and then when it heats up it kind of pulls flat. But this one didn't work out that way. Some of it's pretty good. Long here is pretty good, but that's mostly because we have all this shape in the body. Right here we have a low spot, right here we have a low spot, so this area particularly needs to be pulled out. And then along this seam, most of this seam, you can see where it hasn't been able to be ground flat without getting into the base metals. Kind of this area over here, and really on this side it's only about the top half. The bottom half is pretty good. So we've got the stud puller out again, and stud welder rather, and we'll get the hammer and some other equipment, and we'll just put some studs along here. We're going to work this area first because it's the lowest, and getting this out will help pull the rest of this out, and then we'll just kind of work our way along till we have a nice even feeling finish so that we can come back and go ahead and weld all this, or grind all this off and get this ready for undercoating. I keep saying that 2 or 3, 4 episodes now, but it's just so many things that have to be complete before you put that undercoating on, because once it's on, if you need to go back and weld up a hole or change a little something, it melts it, it damages it, and then you basically have to redo that process over. So it's just not worth wasting any money on it. So we're going to come in and take off some paint right around this area so we can get some studs welded in. You guys saw the video recently on, you guys probably have Facebook. They show some guys using the glue stick technique to, you know, he kicks the fender, puts a big old dent in it, and then they use these glue sticks, and they're gonna pull the fender out, and he pulls the whole fender off the car. So I'm sure it was set up, but I did think it was kind of funny. Got my little modified hammer here, and I can reach in because of that access door for the fuel filler. I can reach in and maybe tap on that a little bit. Right now I can kind of see where my hammer's at through this hole. If I try and get down too far, I won't be able to see it. I'll just kind of be guessing. Actually came out really pretty good right there. Just need to work a little bit on the bottom. We got most of, I guess, the dent. It's just the warpage where the metal is pulled away from the heat. We got most of that out just in that one attempt at pulling. I got one little spot right here that I'm going to have to go ahead and weld a stud on, unless I can just manage to find that spot with the hammer, you know, and I'll try that first because that's easier. But we're pretty close. We've got a little low right here in the seam. So it's really just right here, maybe the last 2.5, 3 inches, and a dent right there. And I think we can come in and try and hammer and dolly a little bit. We'll go ahead and try and pull on this just a little more, and try and get behind it. And if not, weld a stud right there and try and get that. And then we'll hammer and dolly the whole thing again to try and relieve any stresses in the metal. And I think it's going to be pretty much ready to try and get the metal finish done. There's one I don't have to cut off. I think I need to run a second row of studs just to the left of these. So what was happening is I had a little high on this side and it's low right there just a little bit. Let's try putting the hammer right behind there if we can. Try and raise that up just a little bit, and then we'll grind that weld off. Now let's get a grinder and take those off there. We got this side pretty good. It probably go over it one more time with a hammer and dolly from the inside. From about here, you know, maybe in here is about as far as I can reach through that hole. So from about here all the way around, the only way we can do it is to pull out and work the metal around it. Most of this upper seam was pretty good anyways. You can see here it looks really good. Just need to pull out a little bit of low here, the low on the top side, low on the bottom side, and then most of this weld puckered in as well. So we'll pull that. And, you know, is it perfect? Is it metal finish? No. Is it, you know, but we're not trying to leave this thing in bare metal with a clear coat or something. What we're going to do is put a little bit of filler over the whole truck probably and smooth it out, and that'll be it. It gets painted white. So it's just, you could chase all of this for days trying to get it perfect, and you would eventually get there. But to me, it's not worth the time that would take in this particular vehicle. It's not a show truck. It's not. It's just going to be a truck to take the dogs to the river and my grandkids up into the hills. Now, as you're cleaning these up, if you find pinholes, that's a different story. You need to come back and get your welder and fill those in. So I've got one there, one right there, and one down here. and I think one right there in the corner. So those you do need to come back and fill in, because they'll collect moisture and it'll just rust out from that little bitty pinhole out. So do go about the process of fixing those. But anything else, you know, it just doesn't need to be perfect. We're going to put a little skim coat over it anyway. So that being said, I just finished making this side of porcupine, and we'll come in, pull these out a little bit, use our hammer and our slide hammer and everything to just get a nice shape back in it so we can take off the edges of the welds, and should be pretty painless. This side's not real bad. Well, neither was the other side, but there was enough it needed work. Now, I've gone through with the slide hammer and pulled that, and it pulled out really nice. It just came right out. There's one or two little spots. They're not going to be that big a deal to go back and get. But here's what I want to tell you is, don't go back now with your grinder and just grind away on this whole panel, and because you can put as much heat in that panel with this grinder as you did with the welder, and you can put it over a bigger area even and make the warps bigger. Right now we're pretty localized to where it's just the heat pucker from the weld, and that's enough work to do. So don't go back and just go hog wild. The tools I like to use to get this weld cleaned up is either a 60 or 80 grit flap wheel on your 4.5 inch grinder. And then once I get it close, I like to switch to my angle grinder. It's air powered in this case. And it's a 2-inch Rolock type screw-on flat disc. I like that because I can get in there and I can really detail it. I used a 3-inch for years, and I liked it better when it shrunk, so I kind of switched over to the 2-inch. So then once you've got it spotted and everything, you're happy with what you've got, then go back with like an 80 or 120 grit, something on a little bit bigger disc, 4 or 5 inch, and just kind of give the whole panel a once over, and that'll help to blend any little imperfections in and make it look pretty nice. So we'll take our grinder, knock all these little beads off, and then judge for whether you're getting the panel too hot is like all of this is warm, but I can touch it. Right down here, the panel is hot. I can't really hold my hand there. So I need to stay away from that area for a little while. I can come back and work these, but as long as you can touch it with your bare hand, you're going to be safe to work it. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to be working. We've kind of gotten all we're going to get with that bigger wheel, so now we're going to come in, stay away from this area for a while. We're going to come in up here and we're just going to hit it with this 2-inch and start working our way down the weld again and kind of moving around. when you're grinding, stay on that weld. Don't get over here onto your two panels. All you're trying to do is take that weld down to be flush with those. Don't try and blend them in where you're actually cutting a groove or whatever with the edge of your wheel. If there's a little ridge, it's not going to hurt anything if you're not trying to metal finish it. You know, if you got a little ridge and you try and blend that and you end up taking all your metal out of this other panel, that's a big hole. Now you got to go back and refill. Saw a pinhole right there, started to fill it, and the metal is so thin it just went right through. Let that cool a bit, we'll come back and fill it. There's another one. Best way to get into these two spots where I ground too far and I basically turned it into tinfoil, and what showed up for me was a pinhole, but what it is the metal has gotten so thin there's just nothing there. So the best way to fill this would be have a piece of copper that you could put behind there and you could weld onto the copper. Problem is I got no way to get my arm all the way back this far and there's no access over here. The only access is on this side, and only on the driver's side. On the passenger side, you got less access. So what we're gonna have to do is just put some little spot welds around this until we can tie it all together. And if I turn the machine on, it'll work better. Okay, those grew. So I had gotten pretty thin for probably 1 inch here and 3/4 of an inch over here. So we're gonna let that cool again, then we'll grind that and these others off. And we may find, you know, that we had to build up so much weld there, we may find some more pinholes, but we'll get them filled. Just take your time, don't little bitty spot welds as much as possible, especially around the edge, because then that gives you a place to go to the center to fill in. And just don't try and burn a weld in. It's not like a rosette or a fillet weld. You're not trying to fill all that in one shot. You just, lots of spot welds, let it cool a little bit, move to another one, go back. All right, after a couple rounds there, everything's pretty nice and smooth and ready for probably an 80 grit DA. Knock down all this so that we can put a filler on here and a little bit of primer. I think from here, we need to go back inside the truck, finish doing some grinding in there. We're getting close. Getting close to being ready to undercoat. So it came in the mail this week, which is something I've been waiting on, which is my seam sealer. So I got black to do the underside of the body, where I'm going to be putting black undercoating, bed liner, and then I also got white for doing the interior part of the truck in the areas where I'll be painting white or putting the maroon color, either paint or bed liner inside there. So a little easier to cover white than it is black. It's interesting, you can hear something in there that's almost sounds like sand or something. Even this will take the better part of a day to get the bottom side of the truck seam sealed and ready. So that's yet to come, but we've got the material. So let's get some more of this stuff knocked out. All right, that is it. I think we are finally ready to put some undercoating on here, and part of that process is we need to seam seal all of the stuff on the bottom and on the inside of the truck eventually, but for what we're trying to get to, we're going to seam seal everything on the bottom of the truck, which will take a day or two or three. There's a lot of seams under there, but we are finally there. I've washed the truck out. I ran water through the rocker panels. I ran water through everything I could. You saw me drill a couple of holes in the bottom of the rockers at the back. I had sealed all that up, knowing that either I needed to seal it up completely at the front and at the back, or I needed to have weep holes in it. And I started looking, and there are so many places where you don't weld all that stuff solid, so it was already dripping some water out. So either we got to try and seal all those up with either seam sealer or undercoating, or going through and welding all that stuff up, and there's just no reason for it. So it made more sense to drill a couple holes, because water and other stuff is going to get up in there, and there's no way for it to get out if it's completely sealed. And because of the way the wheel wells are designed and the quarter panels and everything, water can come in way back here, go all the way up over the wheel well, and then drop down, and it will get into the rocker panel. So it made more sense to drill a big enough hole that water and debris could get out. And then I can either go get some plugs, like rubber plugs, Ace Hardware, somewhere like that, and drill the hole out to the exact size of those plugs and plug them, or I can just leave them open so that it drains. As part of our undercoating process, I am going to seal up that as much as possible, much like I did the frame rails, if you remember way back. And a long tube off of the can of sealer, and you spray that stuff through the whole frame, or through the whole box, of the frame, in the case of when I did it already. And in the case of the rocker panels, you just start at one end and pull that stuff all the way through, and it sprays kind of in a 360 pattern, so it sprays all the sides as you're drawing that tube, that long spray nozzle tube out. And so we'll do the rocker panels that way. We'll do anything else that has cavities inside there that are hidden. So up inside the quarter panels on both sides, we'll get as much of that as possible. And then we'll probably do that as far as we can forward. And then the back part where we know we're going to get moisture and stuff because of the open areas, then the same product we're going to use to undercoat this, we'll use that inside the rocker panel, or inside the quarter panels. So we're going to seal this thing up as best as possible in hopes that nobody ever has to go through this process again. But the good news is I think we're there. So we're going to let this thing sit out here for another couple hours and let it dry out completely. We'll pull it in, and then it'll be time to try and lay it up on its side and probably start the process of seam sealing. So that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, all those YouTube things, and I will see you next time on Allison Project Car TV.